Death, Rebirth, and the Cycle. Introduction. The Myth of the Fallen Ones. Welcome, traveler of shadow and light. My name is Elnad El Kasmenaay, and this is the Myth of the Fallen Ones, a sanctuary for those who seek not entertainment, but remembrance. Here we do not chase mysteries for decoration. We return to them as apprentices of transformation. Each episode is a descent into the forgotten chambers of the soul. Alchemy, archetype, dream, and flame, where ancient wisdom and modern mind meet in quiet conversation. We speak to the fire that moves beneath history, the one our ancestors called divine, the one that still burns behind the ribs of every living being. If you've come looking for comfort, you may not find it here. But if you've come seeking truth, the kind that burns clean, that rebuilds you from within, then you are in the right place. Together, we walk the old paths not to worship their dust, but to awaken the gold they hid inside us. Because the myths were never about gods in the sky. They were mirrors for the God within. In our last gathering, we contemplated the philosopher's stone, the symbol of integration, the heart of the great work. We learned that to hold the stone is to understand unity, spirit and matter reconciled, heaven and earth as one breath. But today we go further, for even the perfected stone whispers of impermanence. All that achieves harmony must one day return to the fire, to renew the rhythm of becoming. This is the law of the cosmos, the mystery of death, rebirth, and the cycle. Transition, from the stone to the circle. When the stone settles into silence, when the hands of the worker cool and the furnace dims, a deeper current rises beneath the stillness. For the work does not end with illumination. It begins again in dissolution. The stone, perfected, begins to hum, not with triumph, but with invitation. Its song is circular. It whispers, "What you have made whole must now return to the fire, so that it may be born again." The adept looks upon the stone and understands that even perfection cannot stand still. Stillness without renewal becomes decay. The eternal secret of creation is that all things must die to stay alive. Thus begins the final initiation: death, rebirth, and the cycle. 1. The necessity of death, the alchemy of ending. Every transformation begins with a breaking. To grow is to enter the discipline of endings. Death is not a punishment. It is the price of coherence. Forms are temporary houses built for eternal forces, and when the tenant grows, the house must collapse. The alchemists called this the negredo of existence, the blackening, the necessary night through which the light must pass. They watched the metals darken and bubble in their vessels, saw the bright surface corrode and vanish, and understood that the same would happen in the soul. To awaken consciousness, one must endure the dissolution of its false shapes. Modern man flees this stage. He clings to his structures, identity, success, relationships, mistaking them for life itself. But the adept knows that the universe favors nothing that resists transformation. The river does not mourn the banks it erodes. The seed does not apologize to the soil it splits. Each surrender is a form of intelligence. Death is the intelligence of renewal. It ensures that life does not stagnate in its own reflection. It breaks the cup so that wine may flow again. It unbuilds the tower that pride constructed in heaven's name. And in its black flame, the adept learns the first great paradox. Destruction is not the opposite of creation, but its silent twin. You have felt this law in your own chest. The friendships that dissolved without explanation. The dreams that crumbled despite your devotion. The versions of yourself that vanished between one breath and the next. In those moments, the mind screamed, "Loss," but the soul whispered, "Space." Death was making room for the new arrangement. The work demands that you not only accept this rhythm, but cooperate with it. When an illusion burns, do not rush to rebuild it. Let the ashes speak. They will tell you what was essential and what was merely ornament. The adept approaches every ending with reverence. He does not demand explanations. He listens for the instructions hidden in the ruin. For in the vocabulary of the cosmos, endings are not periods, they are commas. Each death pauses the sentence of existence so that it may continue with deeper grammar. In the furnace of dissolution, the ego undergoes its first honest initiation. It learns that control is not mastery, and that surrender is not defeat. The small self cracks, the larger self breathes, and in the silence that follows, awareness begins to speak in its true voice, not the voice of ambition, but of participation. To die consciously is to admit that nothing truly yours can be taken, only the borrowed burns. What remains is what you have always been: presence without ornament, awareness without armor, flame without smoke. 2. The phoenix and the Ouroboros, eternal emblems of renewal. From the black soil of endings rises the ancient bird, feathers luminous with the memory of fire. The phoenix does not rise despite the ashes, it rises because of them. It teaches that no death is final when it is entered willingly. Every collapse hides a seed of resurrection waiting for the courage of surrender. In the oldest temples of Egypt, priests told that the Bennu bird, precursor of the phoenix, built its nest atop the sacred obelisk at Heliopolis. When the cycle of its life ended, it ignited itself, singing as it burned. From its own ashes it emerged renewed, carrying forward the memory of its former lives. The fire was not destruction, it was baptism. To the alchemists, this was no myth but a map. The phoenix is the symbol of the purified essence reborn from corruption. When matter completes its passage through the stages, blackening, whitening, reddening, it gives birth to a new substance, incorruptible by decay. So too the soul, passing through its griefs and purifications, awakens to a form of consciousness that cannot die because it no longer identifies with what dies. Where the phoenix ascends, the Ouroboros circles. The serpent swallowing its own tail is the elder symbol, older even than language. It first appeared on the walls of Egypt, coiled around the sun god Ra as he journeyed through the night. The Greeks inherited it and made it the signature of Hermetic wisdom. Jung later recognized it as the living diagram of the psyche's self-renewing nature, consciousness devouring and regenerating its own contents. The Ouroboros is the law behind the phoenix's fire, the truth that every ending feeds the beginning that follows. It is the pulse of eternity, the rhythm of solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine. The serpent does not die, it consumes its death and turns it into life. In your own life, the Ouroboros manifests as the return of old patterns, the recurring lessons you thought you had mastered, the familiar emotions that resurface in new forms. These are not failures. They are cycles completing their orbit. You meet the same fire until you learn to pass through it with awareness instead of resistance. Together, the phoenix and the Ouroboros form a complete gospel of transformation. One speaks of ascent through surrender, the other of continuity through change. The bird burns to rise, the serpent devours to remain whole. Between them lies the secret of all becoming, renewal through participation in the rhythm of destruction. The adept meditates on these symbols not as art, but as mirrors. He asks, where am I burning and where am I circling? Which parts of me are ready to turn to ash, and which must learn to shed without fear? Each answer refines the work, bringing him closer to the realization that immortality is not the denial of death, but the intimacy with it. For to be immortal is not to live forever in one form. It is to consent to die completely into every form, again and again, without losing awareness. 3. The pulse of consciousness, dissolution and creation as one act. Everywhere in nature the same pattern breathes, collapse and emergence, contraction and expansion, silence and sound. The universe itself was born from this pulse, the great exhalation of being after the infinite stillness of potential. Stars live and die by it, seasons dance to it, even your breath traces its curve in miniature. This pulse is not mechanical but sacred. It is the heartbeat of consciousness learning itself. In each cycle, awareness explores a new degree of differentiation, then returns to unity to rest, only to begin again. Creation and dissolution are not two separate motions. They are the alternating sides of one living rhythm. To live without understanding this rhythm is to suffer endlessly, mistaking every dissolution for disaster. But to live within it is to move like water, flexible, luminous, perpetually renewed. In alchemical psychology, Jung described this rhythm as the psyche's capacity for self-regulation. When one side of the self becomes too dominant, reason over intuition, will over surrender, the unconscious rises to dissolve the imbalance. This is death working in service of harmony. Every breakdown, every dark night is the psyche restoring its inner equilibrium. In your own experience, this may appear as a sudden crisis, a loss that forces reevaluation, or an unexpected insight that shatters an old belief. These are not intrusions, they are corrections. Consciousness, like fire, must consume its excess fuel to burn cleanly. The alchemist learns to recognize this pattern as grace disguised as upheaval. He no longer resists the rhythm. He collaborates with it. He practices heat without haste, the discipline of allowing transformation its natural tempo. When dissolution arrives, he does not panic. He breathes. When creation begins, he does not boast. He listens. The goal is not permanence but participation, to move with the universe's exhalation and inhalation, to become a conscious expression of its ongoing experiment in awareness. When you align with this pulse, you begin to sense that life is not happening to you, but through you. You become the bridge where spirit and matter exchange breath. Each death you endure purifies perception. Each rebirth expands it. This is the rhythm of the soul remembering its origin, to be both the flame and the ash, both the serpent and the bird. 4. Conclusion. The circle that breathes. All things that live must die, and all things that die will live again. This is not tragedy but symmetry, the universe remembering its own design. The adept who understands this ceases to cling and begins to participate. He no longer asks, "How can I avoid loss?" but rather, "How can I die beautifully each time the fire calls?" Death is the great equalizer of illusions. It strips away what time cannot carry and leaves only the essence. In its mirror, ambition dissolves, fear softens, and the soul finds its true proportion. The alchemist learns to enter this mirror willingly, to practice small deaths each day, a breath released, a resentment surrendered, a mask unmade. Through these miniature endings, the grand death becomes less foreign. It becomes a friend waiting by the final gate. Rebirth is not something promised, it is something earned through the courage to vanish. When the old self burns clean, the new one does not appear as a stranger, but as the truth that was always waiting beneath the ash. This is the eternal rhythm. Not punishment, not reward, but renewal. The phoenix rests its wings. The Ouroboros completes another circle. The adept closes his eyes and feels the pulse of the cosmos echoing through his own chest. Dissolution and creation, exhale and inhale, silence and sound. The work continues without end. For this is the covenant of consciousness, to die into awareness and be reborn into presence again and again, until awareness and presence are the same thing. You are the flame that forgets itself to become light, and in remembering, burns brighter still. The wheel turns, the ashes whisper, the circle breathes, transition toward modern alchemy. And now, as the circle closes, the work turns its gaze forward. The fire that once illuminated the temples of Chem now flickers behind the glass of modern minds. The furnaces have changed, once clay and copper, now circuits and code. But the question remains the same. How shall we transmute the raw material of our age into gold of meaning? The alchemists of old labored with metals. We labor with symbols, technologies, and choices. Yet the process endures, the blackening of ignorance, the whitening of awareness, the reddening of integration. In every age, the work adapts its costume, but not its purpose. So in our next descent, we enter the world of modern alchemy, not as spectators of history, but as inheritors of its flame. We will ask, what does transmutation mean in a digital world? Where is the philosopher's furnace now? And how can a human being remain whole in a time that dissolves every form faster than fire ever could? The cycle continues. The experiment begins anew. And as always, the flame waits for the one who dares to tend it.